Guys, let me ask real quick. How many people like to take pictures? Okay, let me ask this again. How many people like to take pictures? How many people you hate pictures? Okay, but let me look at this now. How many of you, if you had an option between a word book and a picture book, you would choose a picture book? There you go. Now, here's the thing that we've looked at. Yes, you can learn a lot of things when you read it. We know that. But guys, we know that right now too, we're in a society that's very picture driven. That's very, there's a huge emphasis on seeing things and hearing things and feeling things instead of simply just reading things. And guys, over these past few weeks, we've talked about some symbols. Everybody say symbols. You know, we talked a little bit about emojis. We've talked about logos and stuff, but one thing that we really tried to focus on in this series is some symbols that Jesus used throughout his word that mean something. The first week we talked about communion, or the Lord's Supper. Y'all remember us talking about the bread and the wine? Who can tell me what the bread stood for whenever when they were doing the Last Supper? What did it stand for? His body that was going to be broken. All right, who can tell me what the wine stood for? His blood that was shed for us. So guys, we talked about a little about the Lord's Supper, how that night before he was to be arrested, he said, listen guys, I want you to do this. Every time you have communion, how many people have ever been part of communion in church before? One thing he said, guys, every time you do that, yes, it's good to have food, it's good to have drink, but I want you to remember me when you do it. Everybody say this, remember him. Y'all ever feel like sometimes we get so busy in life that we forget him? It's easy to do that. Why? Because we're so busy nowadays, students. You know, it doesn't shock me now that I really feel like a lot of students face a lot more struggles than probably previous generations. Why? Because not only are you one of the busiest generations that we've seen, but also with the additions of the internet, and on top of that, having social media, all of these different things have contributed to where, you know what, you're constantly doing something. You never have downtime anymore. I mean, hey, if we were to just stop right here, everybody freeze, don't do anything, don't say anything, don't look at anybody. I want you to just sit there. Starting to get a little awkward, isn't it? See, some of you guys are so used to constantly doing something. At that moment, I started seeing some of you started twitching. And it was crazy because I can almost see some of you, your thumbs started to move. Why? Because you had a slow moment, and you just wanted to open your phone and just say, okay, there's nothing going on. Let me check my Instagram. Let me check my Snapchat and see if something came up because I can't handle stopping. We're such a busy society, and one thing that we want to remind you of is this: don't forget about Jesus. Now, last week, we talked about another symbol. It's actually the big symbol of Christianity. Who can tell me what we talked about? Yes, ma'am. The cross. And we said this, you know what? Most symbols out there in the world right now, they're like positive. They're uplifting. I mean, you think about this. When you think about... let's say this, the 4th of July, you think about fireworks, the American flag, patriotism. You think about just different things like summertime. Probably people start thinking of beautiful weather. You don't go to school. The beach, all those kind of things. It's beautiful pictures. But then when we have a symbol as Christians, it's a cross. But we said actually, that cross is the most beautiful thing ever. Why? Can anybody tell me why the cross is such a beautiful symbol of Christianity? Yes, sir.
Because it was the only way that our debt could be paid.
It's the symbol that, you know what, yes, we may have all messed up, but you know what? When Jesus died on the cross, he paid for our sin. When we look at a cross, yes, we know what happened there, but it's also a symbol that, you know what, somebody loved us so much that our debt has been paid. When we look at the cross, notice this. Our symbol is not a cross with a man still hanging on it. Our symbol is a cross that is empty. Why? Because Jesus came off of that cross and he's alive today and he's coming back for us. See, there's so many symbols that, man, we need to know what they mean. But, you know, students, when I start looking at this, we also have symbols that represent us. When we look at our lives, you know what? There's things that we can relate to. And here's the thing that we're going to look at today. We're going to look at the symbol of your life. We've talked about the symbols that Jesus talked about in communion. We talked about the symbol of the cross. But I want to ask you, when you look at yourself, when you think about how you feel on a daily basis, what you enjoy, what you like to do, what you hope to do one day, if I could ask you right now, what is the symbol of your life? I want you to think about this for a minute. Don't respond yet. But what would it probably be? See, because here's the thing I think about. All of our lives are different. Every single person in here, you got a different story. Why do I say that? Well, think about this. You all have different backgrounds. Many of you go to different schools. I mean, most of us have different parents. But even within that, you know what? You've got different interests. Some of you, you've been a Christian, it may seem like your whole life. Some of you, you may have just started serving Christ last week. Some of you, you've grown up in a Christian family that brought you to church every single week since before you were even thought of. Like the thought of not being in church, you can't comprehend. But there's some of us here that, you know what? You may be the only person in your family that goes to church. There's some of us even in here that, you know what? You started coming to church, and because of you getting so involved in Loxley students and God changing your life, now your family is in church. You believe that we've actually got students in our student ministry that have impacted their family that much that because they came here to Loxley students, got on fire for God, now their family's coming to church with them? But think about this. We all come from different backgrounds. We're all different. And here's the thing, too, that I remember. I'm going to read this out because I want you to hear this. We are all on a journey with God, and we are all in different places and steps of that journey. You know, that's the challenge sometimes of ministering within a group, because I've got some people in here, you've been a Christian. You know what? Even some of our staff, they've been Christians for decades. There's people in here that you've been Christians for 10 years. Christians for 5 years, Christians for 1 year, Christians for 6 months, Christians for 6 weeks, Christians for one week. And some of us, you know what? Maybe tonight you're going to accept Jesus. Maybe, you know what? You've come here tonight and you don't even know if you want to serve Jesus. Have y'all got the point that, man, when we come here together, we've got people from all different backgrounds. And here's the thing. Tonight, I want us to be able to slow down and say, where am I at in life? And realize this. Where you're at right now, I'm going to say this. Let's say you've chosen to serve Jesus already. I want you to realize, you know what? Don't get upset because you're not perfect. Don't get upset because you're not doing things just like that other person that's sitting in that other section. Don't get upset because, you know what? You can't speak like that person, or you can't sing like that person, or people don't notice you like that other person. Why? Because you're not that other person. God created you to be you. And what we've got to help you do is we've got to take the time to say, okay, let's look at how God created you. Let's look at how God made you. And let's see what these next steps look like for you. I've got a couple of slides, and what my awesome person at the computer tonight is going to do is we're going to go back and forth between these slides for just a couple of minutes. You're going to see 8 images. And they're going to be random images, but I'm going to ask you, go ahead and show them that one and then show them the next one. We're going to go back and forth between those. And I'm going to ask you to get a little deep for a minute, okay? Well, we're going to put our serious moment on for right here. I want you to look at these, and I want you to think about how you feel. I want you to think about where you feel like you're at in life. And as you look into these, I want you to look deep into them. And I want you to say, okay, which one symbolizes your life right now? Out of 8 pictures, I want you to look at them, and you know what? Maybe you can say right here, the spare change on the top, say, you know what? I feel like I'm valuable, but I feel like some people treat me just like spare change and want to throw me to the side. Maybe some of you look right here and see that long road, and you see, man, there's a beautiful sight way ahead of me, but I feel like I've got a lot of desert to drive before I can ever get there, and I'm miserable in the meantime. Let's look at another one. You may be right here. It may be like you're holding a map, and you see all of these different options, and you have no clue where you want to go. You have no clue. You see all the options, but it's almost overwhelming in life. I mean, you see all these options. I want you to look. Has everybody got a picture yet? Everybody got one that symbolizes you? I'm going to give you about another 30 seconds, okay? As soon as you get one, just wave at me real quick. Just wave at me real quick. Okay, that's good. There you go. Wave at me as soon as you find one. Got you? Gotcha? Everybody's finding one? Good. Got about 10 more seconds. Those of you that have found one, I'm going to ask a couple of you just to briefly explain why you chose that, okay? I'm going to ask some people just to be able to open up for just a little bit on that. Okay? 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Okay. Can I have just like a couple of people to look and say, hey, this is my symbol, and this is why I chose that? Abby, what you got, girl? Which one was your symbol?
I think mine would probably be the roadmap. I have a whole bunch of options that I'm looking at now, all going to glorify God, like what I'm going to do with my life, and they're both so important to me, but I don't know which way to go.
Gotcha.
I'm trying to figure out what I want to do.
That makes sense. I got you right there. All right. Anybody else? Yes, sir.
I chose the mountain, the green one.
Uh-huh.
Mainly, I just get out into that open areas like that, and I just feel like nothing can touch me. So
That's good.
that symbolizes that I feel really trapped in this life that just comes back to itself.
Got you. So you looked and you saw that picture out there, and it represented a place where you can just get away and just be yourself. I like that. That's good. Did you raise your hand? What you got, Elizabeth? The green pasture out there also? Good.
Crazy at first, but the more you walk down, the more rough it gets to find. And I feel like that represents a lot of people's life.
It's not what? It's not going to be perfect. That's good. Let me have somebody over here. Y'all, if we can have somebody just, what was your symbol? You don't have to have a long explanation. What was your symbol? Couldn't find them? That's okay. RJ, what's yours, buddy? There was a lot, yeah. Let's look just on these 4.
I kind of would like reverse the music right there
The music right there?
because like a lot of sin can travel to music sometimes, but once you like get into the better one,
Mhm.
it really makes you feel good.
That's good. It represents a good feeling to you. Is that right? That's cool, buddy. That's good. Well, guys, and here's the thing. I know that, man, looking at this stuff, it makes you think. And here's the thing that tonight, guys, there's points in life. You know what? We've got several people right now that they're in transition between this group and our college group. They're right now, it's like hyperdrive right now. Why? Because they're hitting that moment where they're fixing to get ready to graduate, and life is fixing to change. How many of y'all, whenever life starts speeding up, it scares you? I mean, let's just talk about it for a minute. How many of y'all, not only when life starts to speed up, but life starts to change, is it scary to you guys? It's really scary. And you know, a lot of times whenever we start facing these scary moments, in order to avoid that stuff, many times we'll do busy stuff. We'll jump on social media. We'll call somebody up and say, hey, let's just go shopping. Let's go down to the beach for a little bit. Let's just go get away so that I don't have to think. Now, here's the thing. There's nothing wrong. I'm going to say this. I enjoy being on social media. I enjoy getting to know all these things. But students, there's times whenever we've got to actually come to reality. We've got to face life and realize that, you know what, there are times whenever our life is going to change. There are seasons in life where we have to make decisions. There are moments in life whenever, you know what, we've got to choose whether or not we're going to do the right thing. But also there's times in life to where, you know what, we've got to choose how we're going to relate to other people. See, because here's one of our biggest struggles. When many of you, because I saw some of you guys, the more you looked at these pictures, the more you started seeing yourself in some of them. Maybe some of you, it's hard to narrow down to one picture. Maybe you saw yourself in a couple of the pictures. Maybe you looked and you said, man, I feel like that. I look at that and that reminds me of what I go through. It may not be on a daily basis, but at least once a week, I have that feeling hit me. That picture symbolizes me. And what happens is we get to feeling the way we feel, but then just imagine this. Just imagine feeling like you feel and then throwing yourself in a room with a bunch of other people feeling like they feel. Emotion overdrive. Come on, students, think about this. How many of you ever feel like your emotions are like way up here? I'm gonna tell you, students, there are times like let's just say this, I will get so emotionally like overwhelmed. It feels like my emotions, and I'm a little guy, but it feels like my emotions go all the way up here, and I'm trying to juggle it, and all of a sudden I'm like, oh, by the way, I need to be helping people. Lord, does that not get scary sometimes? But here's the thing I want you to look at. It's okay to be you. But you've got to start letting Jesus love you. You know, it makes us feel good to know that Jesus does love you. But sometimes, guys, we don't necessarily let him love us. Have y'all ever had somebody come up to you and you know that they meant it? Maybe a family member or maybe a fellow Christian. They looked at you and they said, I love you. I'm not saying in a romantic way. I'm saying in a family, a good general, I love you and I want to be here for you. How many of y'all have ever had somebody say that to you? Okay, after they said that to you, have you ever had a problem? You may have heard it, but did you have a problem letting them love you? See, tonight I want us to look at something because you know what, guys? When we started seeing that, we started seeing our symbols. And I'm going to say this, tonight you've got a choice. You can choose to open yourself up and start really acknowledging where you're at in life. You can start really acknowledging how you feel, the things that you're facing, the opportunities you've got, but also the struggles that you face. You've got an opportunity tonight to open yourself up and say, God, everybody else, this is me. And from that moment, you can let Jesus start working. I want us to look tonight in the scripture. It's Luke chapter 19. We're going to look at verses 1 through 10 at a story of a man who finally opened up. You know, students, you know one of my favorite parts of ministry? Number one, I would say this, it probably has two parts. Number one, I love it when I initially get to meet students. You know why? Because they don't know me yet. Think about this. I love going up to students that don't know me yet and giving them a high five, acting all excited, because I'm excited to have them here. But you know what? I typically get one of two reactions. Number one, dude, that dude is crazy. Or number two, oh snap, am I supposed to remember this guy? Have I seen him somewhere? But either way, I can't help it. I love people. I want to be around them. So number one, I love it when I get to meet people. But number two, I love it whenever I get to walk them through an awesome experience with God. I love it when something happens and they start to experience God. How many of y'all have ever got to know somebody initially and you know what, they didn't really acknowledge you at first, but then afterwards you started getting to know them more and they start to open up and they let God do something in their life? Y'all ever seen that? It's an awesome feeling. So let's listen to this. This is what happened in the story of a man named Zacchaeus. It says this, Jesus entered Jericho and made his way through the town. There was a man there named Zacchaeus. He was the chief tax collector in the region, and he had become very rich. If you don't have to pay taxes a whole lot yet, tax people are not very nice. I'm just kidding. If your mom or dad or relative is a tax person, I love them. God bless them. But let's look at this. He was the chief tax collector in the region, and he had become very rich. I wonder why. He tried to get a look at Jesus, but he was too short to see over the crowd. I feel you, brother. But listen to this. So he ran ahead. Get this, guys. He was a guy that not a lot of people liked. It's just truth. He was rich, but he had no friends. And listen to this. He tried to get a look at Jesus, but he was too short to see over the crowd. So he ran ahead and climbed a sycamore fig tree beside the road, for Jesus was going to pass that way. In verse 5, it says this: when Jesus came by, he looked up at Zacchaeus and called him by name. Listen to this right here, guys. Jesus looked up at this guy that nobody liked, and he said, Zacchaeus, quick, come down here. I must be a guest in your home today. Now, I'm going to go ahead and be straight up with you guys. There's not too many people I've looked at that's been jerks that I looked and said, hey, listen, I've got to go hang out at your house today. I mean, really, let's think about this. There's not many people in this life that I've looked at that, you know what, I really didn't like them, and I looked and I said, I want to go hang out at your house. I want to have an awkward dinner where we sit across the table and I pretend to like you. But there was something different about Jesus. Listen, this is what happened. He said, I must be a guest in your home today. So listen what happened. Zacchaeus quickly climbed down and took Jesus to his house in great excitement and joy. But the people around were displeased. Notice this. Jesus looked up at this guy that nobody liked, and Jesus said, hey, I want to go hang out at your house with you. So Zacchaeus starts climbing down the tree, and everybody around that was listening to it were mad. I can imagine them thinking about this. Out of everybody in the crowd, he picks them. I mean, listen to this. This is what the people would say. The people were displeased. He has gone to be the guest of a notorious sinner, they grumbled. You know, this reminds me of so many people that I've heard that they're pretending to be all holy and righteous, but they're jealous when anybody else gets attention. Listen to this. Verse 8, meanwhile, notice when I say meanwhile, you know what that means? It means that Zacchaeus and Jesus didn't get distracted. Everybody else may have been saying stuff. How many of y'all have ever been in a circumstance where you knew you were supposed to do right, but everybody else was saying stuff or doing stuff that distracted you? How many of y'all have ever been in a time, I'm going to tell you, worship was good tonight, but how many of y'all have ever been in a worship segment to where you wanted to worship, but it seemed like everybody else was distracting you? Have you ever been in that? But notice this, what happened right here. This is the meanwhile moment. Meanwhile, Jesus and Zacchaeus didn't let this distract them. It says, meanwhile, Zacchaeus stood before the Lord and he said, Jesus, I will give half my wealth to the poor. Lord, and if I have cheated people on their taxes, I will give them back 4 times as much. Realize this. This is how Zacchaeus had made all of his money. See, he was collecting tithes for the government, or the taxes for the government. What would happen is he would take the money that they actually owed the government, and then the only way he makes money is if he charges them on top of that. So he says this, if I have cheated people on their taxes, I'm going to give them back not just what I stole from them, but I'm going to give it back 4 times. You know what that means? He's losing money. But he said this, Lord, if I cheated people on their taxes, I'll give it back to them 4 times as much. And Jesus responded, salvation has come to this house today, for this man has shown himself to be a true son of Abraham. For the Son of Man came to seek and save those who are lost. As the musicians are coming up, I want us to look at this right here. There's a huge lesson that we've got to learn. Students, many times, I want you to look at me. Shh, y'all look. Many times we try to be good enough. But you know what happens? Y'all look at me right here. Look at me. Shh. When we try to be good enough, you know what happens? When we start trying to be good enough, we start changing who we are. Because when we start saying, I want to be good enough, most of the time we've looked at somebody else and said, you know what? I just want to be like that person. I want you to realize this. Braxton, you hadn't been called to be Adam. Camille, you haven't been called to be Abby. Kelly, you hadn't been called to be Peyton. Here's the thing, I look in all of this, students, so many times we're trying to be good enough when God is just saying, look inside yourself, realize who you are, and just let Him work on you. You know what, students? It's okay sometimes. It's okay right now if your symbol's a roadmap. You've got all these options in front of you. But you know what? Why not take your symbol and lift it up to God and say, God, will you be my GPS? It's okay, you know what, if your symbol's the music. But think about this. What if you lifted that music up to God and said, you know what, God, will you write this love song? Maybe you feel like your symbol's that spare change. Maybe you feel like, yes, people say you're valuable, but you don't feel like you're worth a lot. Why don't you lift that up and say, God, I don't have a lot to give, but I give you everything. Students, it's learning to take who we are in our imperfections, in our good side, our bad side, and say, God, this is what I have. I give you everything. See, students, here's the thing I look at with Jesus. Jesus chose Zacchaeus. He chose a little guy who couldn't see over the crowd. You know what that says to me? Jesus wasn't looking at physical features when he was trying to find somebody. Jesus chose Zacchaeus. You know what that says to me? It doesn't matter what your past has looked like, because he can affect your future. Jesus chose Zacchaeus. You know what that says to me right here? It says that Jesus wants to be with people who aren't perfect. Why? Because we can only become perfect in Him. Students, I'm begging you to do something for me tonight. Stop trying to make yourself something you're not. Choose to offer up what you've got, what you're facing, what you're going through in life. Say, God, this may not be perfect. It may not be, you know what? I love Jonathan. I look up to Jonathan, but you know what? I can never be Jonathan Abrego. This guy is so stinking talented, he makes me mad. But you know what? I've learned this. If I tried to be Jonathan Abrego, I would only be second best. That would be the best I could ever get. But you know what I can do? I can acknowledge where I'm at in life. And I can come to Jonathan and say, Jonathan, let's team up. God created us both. Let's do this life together. And students, I want you to think about this. What if we came in here, we stopped looking at how everybody's so different. How, you know what, so-and-so dresses different. So-and-so is a different race. So-and-so is a different age. So-and-so hasn't been through what I've been through. So-and-so this, so-and-so that. What if we stopped looking at that and saying, listen, we've all got a symbol that represents us. But let's put our symbols together under the name of Jesus, and let's make a beautiful picture together. So here's the question, students. What's your next step tonight? Many of you, when you looked at those pictures, you saw something in you. I'm gonna ask you tonight, now that you've got an idea what your symbol is, what is your next step? Check this slide out right here. This is the question I wanna ask you. What could you do to take the next step in your faith now? What does that look like for you? You know how you are. You know how you feel. What are you going to do now that you know that Jesus has got his hand reached out for you? Let's pray for a moment. God, I pray right now that you would just touch this place. Help us, God, to take whatever our symbol is of our life. Help us to take however we've been feeling, whatever we've been going through. Help us to take our successes, our failures, our strengths, our weaknesses, God. And I pray, Father, that right now we would open up our hearts and just lift up our hands to you, God, and say, God, it may not be perfect. It may not be as much as others can offer, but God, I give you everything I've got. Help me. Will you do that tonight, students? Lord, help us, God, to open up our hearts tonight. In the name of Jesus, we pray. With your head still bowed, here's the thing I want you to look at. What's your next step in faith? Number one, is it for you to open up and just start being the real you with God? There's some of you that, man, you thought you had the perfect picture of what a Christian was, so man, you tried to line yourself up with that, and in the midst of it, you've got some deep inside issues that you've yet to deal with. Jesus is wanting you to open up and deal with that today. Be the real you. Offer it up to Him. Truly give your whole life to Him. Confess your sins. Give it all to Him. Maybe you've got a sin that, man, you've been living in for a while, and man, you're ready to be the real deal with God. It's going to require you just opening up to Him and giving Him control. Are you ready for that tonight? There may be some of you tonight that you can say, well, Pastor Ori, I don't have any hidden things in my life. I feel like I'm being pretty genuine. But you know what? You haven't been opening yourself up to others. You've got into your own little clique. You've got into your own little comfort zone, and you're refusing to love people in the midst of their sin. I'm going to tell you something, students. To whom much is given, much is expected. And there's some students in here, God's done a lot in your life, and it's time for you to get out of your comfort zone and start loving some people that, you know what? They may not look like you think they should. They may not talk like you think they should. They may not act like you think they should. But you know what? Nonetheless, Jesus is telling you, don't go and love them with a hypocritical love. Go and really try to get to know them. Care for them right where they're at, because here's the thing. Somebody loved you. Somebody loved you when you were in the midst of your own junk. Somebody reached out to you. Tonight, is this you, students? Number one, I want to ask, is there someone here that can say, Pastor Ori, I'm ready to take everything that I am and offer it up to Jesus? Whether it be sin, whether it be a hidden area, if that's you, I want to ask you to move now and come join me in the altar. If that's you and you can say, Pastor Ori, I'm ready to open my full self up to God. I don't want anything hidden anymore. I'm tired of trying to be just like so-and-so. I'm tired of trying to look just like this guy or just like this girl. I want to be the real person that God made me to be. Is there anybody else that you can say, Pastor Ori, the next step for me is just to start being real? It's to take the symbol of my life and offer it up to God and say, God, this is me. I may not be completely happy with how I am, but God, I give it all to you, and I'm asking you to make a beautiful picture of me. Anyone else? This is your time. What is this prayer? This is a time where you are fully giving your life to Jesus. This is that time when you're saying, Jesus, I'm not holding anything back. I'm giving it all to you. I want you to really be Lord of my life. When we say Jesus is Lord, that means He's completely in charge. Now, here's the second thing. I want to ask real quick. Is there someone here that you can say, Pastor Ori, I feel like I've offered up everything of me to Jesus. But Pastor Ori, I don't love people near like I should. Pastor Ori, when I look at how Jesus related to Zacchaeus, many times when I look at people like that, I tend to snarl at them. I tend to turn my head or walk away from them. But I think it's time for me to turn a new chapter in my life, for me to start loving people like I know I should. And maybe it's time for me to get out of my comfort zone, out of my little, yes, maybe I can keep this small group of friends, but it's time for me to open up that group of friends and start to reach out to new people. Is there anybody else? If that's you, you can say, you know what, Pastor Ori, it's time for me to start loving people like I should. If I can have my adults and my student leadership team come down and begin praying with these guys. What we're going to do right now for these next few moments, I want to tell you, students, these altars are still open. And I'm going to say this, maybe tonight you came here and you're going through some hurt that I didn't talk about. Maybe you've got something that you're going through in life and you would like for somebody to pray with you tonight. Maybe it's something your family's going through. Maybe it's something you're personally going through. Will you let us pray for you? I'm going to ask you guys to stand up with us. if you're the altar, you can